Welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I'm your host, Cardinellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everybody.
And it's official. Andrew Yang and his fellow plaintiffs have won their lawsuit against the state of New York. And there will be a Democratic primary election. Cody, tell us what's happening.
Yeah, I know. I do love that framing of people like Andrew Yang and nobody else, or Bernie Sanders and nobody else. Depending on who you ask. We got both of them in this USA.
Well,
Today
his
article.
name is the first one on the paper.
Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders, and I actually believe it was delegates of Bernie Sanders who jumped on. Maybe I don't think Bernie jumped on himself, and then Andrew Yang was suing with delegates. To your point of who?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're gonna go through a little bit why they were suing exactly. I guess it's kind of obvious they were going to cancel the primary in New York, I believe. I guess they were going to remove the names of Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang, and people that were going to be on the primary ballot in the state of New York, with pretty shoddy reasoning. I tried to see their point they were making last time we did a video on this, because they basically said, hey, it's, everyone dropped out to endorse Joe Biden. What's the point of having the election if people are going to get sick? But the more people looked into it, the dumber it was. Anyway, just running through quickly. Federal judge in Manhattan ruled late Tuesday that New York must hold the primary on June 23rd, contending that canceling it would be unconstitutional and take away the ability of the candidates to receive delegates for the party's convention in August, which is also a very good argument. I mean, taking away someone's right to vote. And we'll get into exactly in a second how many people they had predicted the State Board of Elections would not be voting. It's kind of crazy. So we'll go through. The lawsuit was brought on behalf of former presidential candidates Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang. I don't believe Bernie Sanders' name's on the lawsuit.
I didn't see it.
It was illegal for New York to cancel the primary. Andrew Yang released a statement, a little brief, or one quote being, yes, the people of New York will be able to vote in the Democratic presidential primary. Very cool to note that Andrew Yang really did. I've seen some people frame this as, I wish I had the tweets pulled out. People frame it as Bernie Sanders has been ruled to be back on the ballot. It's like, well, and like other names because of a lawsuit by someone else. Like, I guess that's one way of framing it, right? But Andrew Yang, it is worth noting, was one of the main, not only the driving force as far as having because he was one of the many people listing it, but just kind of the face of the lawsuit, which lasted, I think, all of like 5 or 6 days because the election is supposed to happen the end of June. You obviously can't have this go on forever. Also, we're going to look a little bit at the findings the judge had, and it was just kind of like the state gave no real reason other than people could get sick. It's like,
yeah.
What's like, there's
no constitutional argument.
Exactly.
They gave like an emotional argument,
a logical argument,
or a logical argument, whatever kind of argument you want to call it. But it wasn't an actual constitutional law argument for something that is complete and totally constitutional legislation and a civil right.
Yeah, you can't say that we cancel an election because everyone said they suspended their campaign and endorsed them, so you just don't get to vote. It's like, oh wow, that's awesome. I'm glad they voted for me. Anyway, really quickly, the last thing they mentioned here, the commission voted last week to remove 10 presidential candidates from the ballot, except Joe Biden. That was the other thing. It was kind of like we would refer to it as canceling the primary. But what was weirder about it, and I think the other reason why could be a very dangerous precedent to set, because I don't think all 10 names are pulling off that ballot all dropped out to endorse Joe Biden. There's probably some people I never heard of running for president as a Democrat in New York that had their name on the ballot, that had their name taken off. So that's a little bit interesting. Maybe one or two. I'm thinking probably a lot of other names on the list that actually had endorsed them. But that was the thing, that they basically did just say that, well, they're going to cancel we're going to cancel the primary because everyone endorsed Joe. It was really dumb. But here's one other thing I want to get to. So this is from the finding, the ruling itself. It's really interesting. So let's see if I'm a little bigger. It's kind of small right now. But the individual they're talking about here, Barem, I believe, is the same as. Anyway, pull up a second. He works for the State Boards of Elections. This is what they say. So all told, Brem estimates that not going forward with the presidential primary would reduce the number of voters faced with an election by 1,488,715 people, and would result in 615 fewer polling sites opened for 15 hours of in-person voting, 22 fewer early voting sites open for 60 hours of early voting spanning 9 days, and 4,617 fewer poll workers needed. Brem also explains that much of the work to prepare for the election is not consistent with social distancing, and he estimates holding the primary will cost the state approximately $5.6 million. Now, when I was reading through that top to bottom, I was like, wow, sounds like a bad thing. 1.5 million people don't get to vote. Sounds like a bad thing. You're closing 615 polling sites. But I guess from the perspective of saving money and not having poll volunteers that are your responsibility for getting sick, not having people set up, like I said, it's not consistent with social distancing to set up a polling location, and we save $5 million. That's that seemed to be one of the most like that was
Yeah.
the number-based argument they gave. It's like, well, like there'd be a lot of people voting and they'd get sick and be social distancing. But that was crazy to me. The fact that the state was looking at the numbers and said, yeah, it's probably like 1.5 million people we're looking at that are going to be impacted by this. Whatever. Who cares? They just don't get to vote for the Democratic nominee.
Yeah.
I hope they're all like Joe Biden because that's who they're getting.
And it also just, it worries me that there's state bureaucrats that are thinking that way, you know, because I just think, how did an alarm bell not go off in your mind? You know what I'm saying? How did that, just a massive civil rights violate, how did that just not seem like no-go territory? You know what I'm saying? Not having an election
names from a ballot sounds like having the state just step in and remove a name from a ballot sounds wrong. Yeah, it does sound wrong, doesn't it?
But it's beyond like just wrong. It's literally banana republic stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just literally like there's those famous examples where Stalin removed from pictures, you know, people that he didn't like who just disappeared or ran away, you know.
Didn't like, that's one way to describe it.
Yeah, didn't like. Yeah, that's another way of describing it. And you're just like, hey, so where'd Yosef go in that picture? Oh, no, he just ran away. We don't know, so I had to Photoshop him out. You know what I'm saying? That was a horrible accent. I don't even know what country that was from. But it almost frightens me that somebody could so nonchalantly in a country so famous for its civil rights just think that it could do that and people would go along with it. And I get that we're all humans and we all have natural flaws that every generation have to be groomed out of us through our, you know, mutual recognition that the Constitution of the Founding Fathers were right and this is our way of doing things. But man, that was really kind of freaky. And it also made me think of one thing, Cody. This lawsuit in my mind was good because it shows that, okay, these backstops that we've put, you know, these safety nets of the courts worked. Civil rights were violated. Somebody blew a whistle, filed a lawsuit, and the court responded and said, yeah, you can't do this. So to a certain extent, I'm relieved, okay, that the courts and the separation of powers that our founding fathers put together actually just worked. But it also made me question, how many lawsuits are we going to have when this is over? Like, how many civil rights lawsuits are we going to have? Because now this shows obviously that, you know, people are winning these coronavirus lawsuits.
Well, hold on. But
how many lawsuits are we going to have when it's over?
One thing, though, but you brought up very specifically to the point. We're talking about removing names from a ballot for a major state. It's a crazy one. But I want to highlight something, too, before we move on this. Not everybody, and the reason why I'm bringing up this one, I don't always like pulling one tweet, but verified Twitter user, it's one thing. But two, this is a sentiment that had been echoed throughout the comment. I thought it was interesting. So a reporter last night, 18 hours ago actually, it was last afternoon really, tweeted out that Andrew Yang had got the injunction and they were going to have the election going forward. But look at this response from a Luis Mensch saying, Andrew Yang, you murdered some of my neighbors today. Kiss the mayoralty of New York goodbye. But my point is, not everyone was happy with it. It was really interesting to me. There was a lot of people saying like my larger point was there was a group of people on the good, it should be canceled stance. And outside of New York. See a lot of people in there, and the reason why I just use this one, I'm not going to pull every random person said it, but so it was a sentiment echoed throughout, and I've seen it elsewhere. And it's interesting to see. I mean, of course, there's people on both sides of the argument, right? But I just thought it was interesting. A lot of people did kind of say to the idea of sometimes they don't take our rights from us, we'll just give them up. People were like, you know what? We don't need an election. Give it to Joe. I mean, like I said, when we were going through the argument, I could kind of see where they were coming from, where they were saying, why have people get sick and maybe die just so they can come vote for Joe Biden or who's going to win anyway? Even if they come and vote for Bernie Sanders or Andrew Yang or anyone, Joe Biden's going to win. They all suspended their campaign. Yeah. Why go through this? There is, I guess, some kind of argument there, but yeah, just because I don't want the state to remove a name off of a ballot. Just because, they're probably not going to win, right? Like, it's a crazy reasoning for doing it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up. Not everyone is necessarily loving it, but for the most part, of course, people are pretty positive because 1.5 million people get to vote in the primary.
Yeah.
That before wouldn't.
What do you think of that comment? You murdered some of my neighbors today. We went to a little rally yesterday, and there's like people yelling that from the cars and stuff like that. Do you think what percentage of the population do you think is represented by that comment in regards to this? Do you think a lot of people aren't happy with it? Do you think most people
I honestly couldn't. It depends on a lot. Depends. If we're talking about in New York City, probably more. Even though in New York City, people are flocking to parks. That's why, who knows? I just wanted to note that at the same time, while I think it's good news, 1.5 million people are going to be able to vote in New York City. Or not New York City, in the state of New York for the Democratic presidential primary. It's not anything. However, they do note in the arguments there that it's like honestly, man, like there's like down ballot's a real thing. People will show up to vote for Bernie Sanders and then vote down ballot. They won't show up, or they'll even show up to vote for Joe Biden and vote down ballot. And maybe they won't if his name isn't on the list. Even though, you could still vote for Joe Biden. That was the other thing about it too. That was just like, it felt like DNC maneuvering, because it wasn't like the state was like, they're like, well, we'll remove names other than Joe Biden, so like he wins by default or something. I don't know. That was the reason why they had to do it, but. How many people? Who knows? Oh, if they exist. That is a valid point people are making, I think, is that it would be dangerous to reopen. Maybe the language was colorful there, but I think it's a valid concern. I don't know. With things like this, my stance has been the whole time, a lot of this stuff, we're going to find out later if we made the right move or not. It's just how it goes.
Okay.
Because we don't actually know what the right move is now. We don't.
Okay.
We can kind of, this should work, this shouldn't work, we should do that, we shouldn't. And then later we can look back and go, that didn't work. But while you're in it, you really have to just kind of trust. Unfortunately, we have to trust things like our media and our government, which nobody does. And it's one of the reasons why we are seeing more dissent and less. I mean, it's really a shame. For 4 years, everybody involved has done nothing but tank the credibility and respect of everybody in the government and everybody in the media for Americans. Americans are so fed up. Maybe individuals within as institutions, they're like, oh, that one's okay and they're all right, sure. But like by and large, Americans have no faith or confidence in either of like the Senate, the House, the executive branch. None of them. All of them are working against us. People feel like maybe, like you said, maybe you like the Congress, maybe you like the House, whatever, or the Senate, whatever. And then the other thing is on the other side, maybe you like to read Fox, MSNBC, CNN, pick one. By and large, people don't trust media. So we're supposed to just say, well, I'm trusting the decisions they're making, and I'm hoping they're acting in my best interest. But we can't do that, so it is a weird spot.
Yeah, it definitely is a system based upon trust. One of my dearest friends in New York City who'd worked for the late Lehman Brothers did say that, interestingly. He said, at the end of the day, all these stopgaps are basically based upon trust, and we need to do and support systems that cultivate that trust and strengthen that trust, or else that's what would make the system fail. Not an actual failure of any official body, but a failure of trust in the system. And you're right. I think the past 4 years, I've never seen a greater attack upon that trust mechanism in my life over the past 4 years. That was very wise. Code of the Oracle. Let us know what you guys are thinking. If you're actually in the state of New York and this has affected you, please, in the comments below, describe how this might have changed things, what your reactions are. We'd love to continue the conversation going. Follow us on Twitter at PSP Radio 1. This is Problem Solver Politics. We'll see you guys in the next video.